Welcome to League of Women Voters Presents. I'm Jim Robertson, and we're going to talk this evening about extreme weather events. And my guests are Terry Castle. He is the Director of the Office of Emergency Management with Boone County, and Professor Tony Lupo. He's Department Chair and Professor of Atmospheric Sciences at the University of Missouri. Welcome, gentlemen, and thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here, and I am no longer chair. So
okay, well, I stand
that's
corrected. He's back. He's a working guy now. Yeah. So I'm going to start with you, Tony. And when we think about extreme weather, I know yours is a science of long-term watching and analyzing weather patterns. On a shorter term, it sure seems like we're seeing more severe weather events, whether they're floods or droughts or snowfall, what have you. Do the data that you see support that contention that they're more common recently?
Yes, the data support that extreme weather events, especially when it comes to precipitation, are certainly more common. We've seen that this November and December with some of the extreme flooding that happened in St. Louis and even a bit into central Missouri and places beyond. So,
What conditions kind of come together or conspire to produce, whether it's tornadoes or precipitation? What produces those extremes?
well, extremes are produced when you can get a large contrast between two air masses that are warm and very moist, and one that's dry and cooler. And that's going to produce your severe weather. These large rain events, we're just seeing a lot more warmer temperatures being ingested from the tropics. That tropical air is just laden with moisture. And of course, when it meets the mid-latitude cool air, we get what we got in December.
Now, we hear about El Nino. Is that the effect of El Nino, or is it, why is it magnified, I guess?
Well, El Nino is a double-edged sword, actually, for us in the winter period. Most El Ninos produce drier than normal conditions here, but there are a few outstanding El Ninos that have produced 2015-like conditions. And that would be 1982. It was very wet around here during the winter. And 1895 are some examples that really stand out.
And they were similar to the kind of weather we're experiencing now, you think?
Oh yes, very much so. The pattern is very similar, albeit in 2015 a little more magnified.
Well, Terry, you're interested in mitigating the effects of extreme weather. I know you've had a varied experience and diverse experience with Task Force 1, the Urban Search and Rescue Squad, with the State Emergency Management Organization and firefighter, and now Boone County Emergency Management. How do you get ready for an F5 tornado or a snowmageddon?
Well, I think just situational awareness is the number one thing for all of us, whether it's our customers or whether it's emergency management or the fire department or the police department. It's just that we're using that information that those weather folks give us every night and every morning before we go to bed and when we wake up to just give us situational awareness about when we go to bed at 10 o'clock at night and we catch that local weather and newscast. We wake up the next morning at 6 or 5:30. Are they confirming? Are we still on track? And just that situational awareness when we wake up, and the weathercaster said this morning that we're going to have snow that's going to move into this area around 9 o'clock this morning, and it should be out of here by around 2. And they hit it just perfect today, almost exactly perfect today. And just that situational awareness that, you know, if I've got a meeting or I've got to do this or I've got to do that, I may need to take a little longer to get to work or whatever. Just that situational awareness will keep us out of trouble many times on those regular days. The F5 tornadoes, you know, we just have to make a plan, and every person has to make that plan. There's not a gadget that we can go to Walmart or any store and just buy that will fix it for us. If we could, that person would be a billionaire. But that's situational awareness, whether we're at home and the weather forecaster says that we have a good chance of thunderstorms and possibly a tornado rolling through this area tomorrow afternoon in the later afternoon like they normally do. We have to make a plan. If we have a basement at our home, are we going to take shelter there? If we don't, do we know a neighbor that does? Or how are we going to take shelter in our home? Are we going to find that interior room with no windows, that whole thing? And then that plan, do we have a weather radio and a flashlight with some batteries and a few bottles of water at the house? Some things like that are where people are way ahead of the game, just situational awareness.
Sure. And that's great advice for individuals who might be affected by extreme weather. As far as the official, let's call it an official response, what are protocols that your agency has established to say there is a Joplin-style tornado that hits Boone County?
Well,
what happens?
We're watching that weather, and we're getting that information from something called NWS Chat, which comes off the National Weather Service. We watch NWS Chat, and it's a chat, and we go into different chat rooms, and so we're watching what's going on in northwestern Oklahoma and southeastern Kansas and that area, because that's where many of those storms will roll in here from. And we're watching what's going on in those areas, and that gives us an idea of what we can be looking for. And then we're ready to set the sirens off, of course, in this community, should that warning happen. And just get the information out to folks, do those PSAs. And then we have exercises every single year. We have a local emergency operations plan, and we exercise that plan annually, where we bring together all the players, the law enforcement folks, the fire folks, the EMS folks, folks from Public Works, and the ones that are going to help us with the heavy lifting when those storms happen. And we exercise those different scenarios so that when those things happen, it's not the first time we've been around the table with each other. We build those relationships, and we know each other's strong points and where we can help each other to help the community get through this type of a situation.
Mm-hmm. And so in those situations, so let's call it the command and control, that rests with your office?
It does. Command and control at the Emergency Operations Center rests with us, and if the county decides to activate the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center, folks from different disciplines would come to the EOC. So we have all those different disciplines would come to the EOC, and then they in turn communicate with their folks in the field. So I'm not communicating with the sheriff's deputies. Someone from the sheriff's department's doing that, because they speak different languages and they know their resources and their capabilities, so we let them take care of that portion of it. We're the coordinating agency. That's what we do. We build relationships and we coordinate the community. That's our job.
Gotcha. Tony, you mentioned that the forecast was spot on today. Snow starting at 9 and ending at 2, and often we applaud that sort of accuracy, but maybe as often, if not more often, we're shaking our heads. What happened? Talk
Yes.
about the complexities of weather forecasting and why it's so often hard to do.
Well, weather forecasting like today was spot on because of some of the advances we've made in numerical modeling the atmosphere, representing it very well in a computer. And on the short term, we're doing a lot better. But the weather is very interesting because you cannot predict past 14 days with a numerical model, and that's just because of the size of our planet and how it rotates on its axis and the distance from the sun. So these things, these gross characteristics give us a limit of about 14 days. But then inside of these computer models are a lot of intricacies on how we represent the physical principles and the data that we get. We just don't get enough of it. We often say we just want more and more data. We'd love it if we could have it every kilometer or even less. And so the lack of data, and sometimes our lack of knowledge of how things work, like the cloud processes. we only can represent them very generally in a model because they will happen on very small time scales and very small space scales, which we're not quite able to resolve yet.
Mm-hmm. What is the easiest forecast to make and what's the hardest?
The easiest forecasts are actually the summertime because a principle called persistence works. What was happened yesterday will be tomorrow. What happens today will be tomorrow. That kind of forecasting, very nice. The wintertime is always a bear because the weather is just so variable in the center part of the country. And so in a wintertime forecast, a difference of 40 miles can mean the difference between a lot of snow and freezing rain and or rain, just plain rain.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned off camera earlier about kind of a hole in the central part of Missouri where weather patterns really don't apply like they do in the rest of the state. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, we see that Tornado Alley is generally in Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, and maybe a little bit of western Missouri. But if you look at the occurrence of tornadoes or hail or severe winds, there's a little bit of a hole in mid-Missouri if you plot all those on a map. And I have a feeling that it's because of the Ozarks Plateau, and what the Ozarks Plateau does is spin storms down a little bit, and then they spin up as they go off past mid-Missouri. Mm-hmm. And when they spin up is when we get the bad weather, the tornadoes and the hail. So I think the Ozarks Plateau has something to do with that. There's no, believe it or not, there's no research that's been done on that topic, and it might be interesting to do some.
Yeah, it sounds like an accident of geography.
Yes, yes, and Tornado Alley and the fact that the United States gets some of the most severe weather in the world is an accident of geography.
Mm-hmm. And in that vein, how does, say, the Missouri River affect our weather here in Columbia, Missouri?
Well, the effect of the river is going to be similar to the effect of the Ozarks Plateau. The geography will help to spin up or spin down storms or make them more likely to happen in certain areas.
Now, when you say spin up or spin down,
yeah,
what do you mean?
That's a term that we use. We consider that thunderstorms are these rotating tubes of air, and if you contract them, that spin spreads out over a larger area, and so it's a little weaker. And if they spin up, that tube contracts or expands, and the area over which it occurs is smaller, and so it's more severe.
And so those geographic barriers tend to spread them out.
Yes, yes, the geographics can play a huge role, kind of like it does in the western United States. If you live on the coast, you get a lot of precipitation, and then if you live downwind, it's desert in the middle of Oregon and places like that.
Mm-hmm. Terry, you're relatively new to this position. Mm-hmm. Is the Office of Emergency Management, is that going to be housed in the new 911?
That is correct. We will jointly be housed there at the new Emergency Operations Center.
Mm-hmm. And beyond the physical proximity, is there a relationship between 911 and your office?
Well, of course. I mean, the folks at 911 are taking this information and these calls from our customers and dispatching those emergency services folks, and they're also watching that weather very close. They've got 3 or 4 different weather screens and NWS chat and those things going all the time, so they're picking up that information also. Mm-hmm. So it's a very good marriage, if you will, to have us in the same building, mm-hmm. With just a hallway that separates us between the Emergency Operations Center and the 911 Dispatch Center.
Are you, we're approaching severe weather season. March kind of typically is what we think of. Are you doing anything to gear up for that at this point?
Well, there are some annual events that happen. There's always that, there are just that normal, National Weather Service will have that severe weather day where everyone gets tested that one day, and you'll hear the sirens go off. Of course, we put them off here the first Wednesday of every month at around noon. Everyone hears those. So unless there's some weather coming in, and we don't want to confuse folks. So I get a call at about 11:45 on those first Wednesdays saying, you want to set the sirens off? And having listened to the news that morning and the weather and looking at the sky, I think, yeah, this would be a good day to set them off. Or no, I don't want folks, by the looks of the clouds or it's rain, I don't want folks to be confused and think there's an event going. So we gear up that way. You know, the school systems always do something in the spring with severe weather, that sort of thing. And then in the fall, it doesn't really have to do with weather, but it's a planned event. We have the annual shakeout that happens every fall in October usually. They have that day where people practice what's going to happen if there's an earthquake that happens with a New Madrid fault. So those are planned events that we have each and every year.
Is there data, statistical evidence that these drills help save lives?
I think there's absolutely statistical data that shows that. In fact, if you would go and survey folks, you'd find that elementary children are probably the best prepared for an event more than any of the rest of us. They don't have to worry about the mortgage and the car payment and those sorts of things, but they remember what they get in that classroom as far as what to do when there's a fire alarm, what to do when there's that severe weather. When they hear those sirens, those children, they don't just, oh, it's just another siren, don't worry. They take that very seriously. Just like when the seatbelt thing happened 20 years ago. You know, a lot of us who didn't grow up wearing seatbelts every single day, it was a hard habit for us to get into. But our children and our grandchildren would get in the car and say, Dad, you don't have your seatbelt on. I mean, because it was something they grew up with. So these weather things that we put them through, these exercises that we put these kids through, that's transforming right through that generation. So I think this younger generation is much better prepared to take things more seriously than maybe we did when we were children. So,
good. What are the limits of storm sirens? I mean, you always hear some criticism or grumbling that I didn't hear the siren.
Yeah, everyone wants a siren in their neighborhood, and no one wants a siren in their neighborhood. It's kind of like the fire station.
Yeah.
Everyone wants a fire truck within a block, but nobody wants to hear the fire truck go out and the siren go off at 2 in the morning when they're going down the street to someone else's house. So there's always that catch-22, and the variance there is, you know, wind, and it's, you know, time at where you are. I mean, think about our cars. You know, 40 years ago, you could hear a police siren or a fire siren in your old car really easily. Today, the way our cars are insulated and we're all listening to music or whatever's going on, sometimes there are fire trucks and ambulances right on top of us before we hear them. And our houses are the same way. You know, the old houses we lived in, they weren't insulated very well. The windows weren't very well insulated. We live in very well insulated homes. So there are times when people won't hear those sirens. So one of the things that we're looking at right now is a system called RAVE, and it's an electronic alerting system that the people we're actually in the purchasing process of it right now. We're working through purchasing, and the university's going to purchase the same product, and people will be able to subscribe to RAVE, and it'll be sort of like going to a restaurant, and you'll be able to subscribe to whatever alerts you'd like to have. If you'd like to have weather, if you'd like to have active shooter, if you'd like to have shots fired, if you'd like to have whatever you'd like to subscribe to, you'll be able to subscribe to. And then when those things happen, we'll be able to put out that alert, and everyone who is subscribed will get that alert, whether it be on their phone, on their computer, or even their landline. So we're really excited about this, and so is the university.
How about weather radios? Are they effective?
They're very effective, and we'd love to see one in every home. And they're not expensive. I mean, you know, these little Midland or whatever ones you can pick up, they're not, $20, $25. You can buy yourself one, and some of them are they even have a crank on them, so that if the batteries go dead, you can crank them up and even use those things. And they're very effective, and they're a great tool to have.
So there's really no excuse for getting caught unawares.
We'd like to not have one. I mean, we'd like to give people as many options as possible so that no matter what's going on, someone, somewhere you're at, gets some sort of an alert and you don't get caught by surprise when something like this happens.
Yeah. Well, Tony, I know you said that it's impossible to predict beyond 14 days what the weather's going to be, but if, looking ahead to the storm season, if your best guess is we will have none or we will have some, or
Well, when I said we can't forecast beyond 14 days, that I meant with a model. And then, of course, with statistics, we can forecast out quite well to a year or even 2 years, 3 years. And I think for this severe weather season, the statistics would say that we will probably have a little more severe weather than we typically do as we switch from, as El Nino spins down, or as El Nino kind of peters out. So I think if statistics are right, we'll have a little more severe weather now. Hopefully that doesn't mean tornadoes, but you got to be prepared for everything, as Terry says. And owning a weather radio is a good idea. We like to plug that, and I know the ABC station in town likes to plug the radio, so something to do.
better to be prepared.
Yes.
El Nino, we hear and La Nina, is it?
Yeah, La Nina is the flip side of it.
Right. Can you explain a little bit about those two phenomena?
Sure. El Nino is a warming of the waters in the eastern part of the Pacific that happens very irregularly every 2 to 7 years. And it's been with us forever. And of course, the indigenous folks of South America knew about this phenomenon. And when they explained it to the Spanish saw that El Nino, or this phenomenon, was very strong in December, which of course is the Christmas season, so they named it the boy. And of course, the flip side of that is a cooling of the waters of the eastern Pacific, and that's also very irregular. And in the 1970s, they tried El Viejo, the old man, but that didn't catch on, so they used La Nina to describe the cooling waters.
And how is it that those systems or that phenomena affects weather in Columbia, Missouri?
El Nino is going to affect our weather in the winter, generally give us warmer than normal conditions, less snow like we've got this year, and generally drier, although this year is an exception. La Nina typically gives us the colder than normal winters with more snow like we saw in 2010 or 2011. And then in the summer season, some of our research is showing that it's not so much El Nino or La Nina, but how it's transitioning from one phase to another. And of course, with our research has shown that with the transition from El Nino to La Nina, that tends to be associated with hotter and drier summers around here. And I know that's not good news for the agricultural community, but that's what's shaping up for this year.
Can you see, based on models of hundreds of years ago, or I don't know how far your data and your models go back, but can you see cycles that might suggest that we're in for drought or
Yeah, the El Nino cycle and La Nina cycle are two very well-known cycles. We're not exactly sure what triggers them, but they do happen, and we know how they behave after that. Some other cycles that are being discovered now, because we've only got good temperature and precipitation records back to about 1880.
Yeah.
And so we're noticing a 50 to 70 year cycle that we call the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. And that's a mouthful, but that was discovered around the turn of the century. And we're discovering that that has an influence on the strength of the El Nino cycle. And so we're seeing how these things interact. And I'm sure there's even longer term cycles that we're not quite aware of yet.
Do you ever plumb the historical anecdotal kind of information about weather?
Oh yeah, we look at that more in a climate change sense, to look at how climate was in the past, because we can learn a lot from what people have written in their diaries, or even the famous painting of George Washington crossing the Potomac. One of the things you notice in that picture is ice. The Potomac hardly ever gets ice these days, so we know it's much warmer than it was at the time of the Revolutionary War.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, Terry, we are again approaching storm season, and I think you've given us some good advice on how to prepare for any event every day. But anything special you want people to know about the?
Well, I think just be prepared. Have good situational awareness of what's going on, and have a plan, and have a plan B. If plan A is not available, what am I going to do for plan B? And just be aware every day that 1 minute, that 30-second clip you get from that meteorologist at 6 o'clock in the morning can be the difference between, getting in an accident going to work because I was late and I was trying to hurry, versus starting 10 minutes early and just taking my time and making it. And that's what we want everyone to do. We want everyone to get to work or get to school, get wherever they're going to their activities, and get home safely. So just that situational awareness, I think, is the biggest thing.
Is Boone County prepared as far as, let's say, tornado shelters?
We have a shelter plan in our emergency operation plan, so that if we were to have one of those situations, there'd be shelters available. And
how do you communicate that information to people?
That information would come out again over PSAs. We would put those out where people can go for shelters and those sorts of things, to pick up food and water and shelter and those sorts of things in the event that those happens. We have some large areas, some churches and things like that we have set places already established that are known shelter locations for us.
And that's for the aftermath of
aftermath.
Yeah, and I didn't make my question clear, but for protection in the event that a tornado happens, and people don't have a basement.
That's that situational awareness.
We'll
go to your. That's the deal. If you don't have a basement at your house, think about someone in your neighborhood who may. Where you could go, and if not, then you need to think about those areas inside the center of the house, a room with no windows, that closet or that bathroom is always that good area. Yeah. But I would think there's not many neighborhoods in Columbia, and probably in Boone County. You get out in the rural area, it may be a little more difficult because houses are a little farther apart. But in most neighborhoods in Columbia, there's probably going to be a house with a basement. And
with that, gentlemen, we're out of time. I appreciate your knowledge and thanks for being here. And I hope that our viewers got some good advice, and I'm sure you did. And thanks for joining us. And until next time, good night.